His adopted brother murdered his mother.
I had the knife under the math book and saw the knife and screamed, and that's when he killed her.
And all he desired was revenge.
From that point on, I decided I was going to kill him.
See how he was able to forgive and become an American ninja warrior.
What are you waiting on? Your life can be completely changed.
That and more on today's 700 Club Interactive. Hi, and welcome to the show. Sean Clayton struggled with rage and revenge after the murder of his mother. It's all he could think about day or night.
Sean's dad thought military school could help put Sean on a different path, but all it did was fuel his unhealthy vices like drugs and alcohol.
It's just amazing like how far God can really take you, from being a crack addict on the streets to running ultra marathons and sitting in senators' houses having dinner with them. We grew up in a trailer. My dad, he decided he was going to send missionaries and start a painting business.
When Sean was 12, his parents also made the decision to adopt 3 children from Guatemala.
2 sisters and a brother. There's the difference in languages, but they started homeschooling with us. They seemed happy. They were happy to be in the family. Me and my older brother, Ugo, had started to work with my dad. Ugo has trouble because he wasn't waking up to go to work like he was supposed to.
The quiet day of work was interrupted by a phone call from the police. Something was wrong at home. Ugo was asking neighbors for help, and their mother was bleeding on the kitchen floor.
Me and my dad were driving home trying to figure out what was going on. I remember flying down the highway. I was crying. They had already taken my brother Ugo back down to the house to start getting his story. He said that he walked in the house, somebody was in the house with a bandana. They ran past him out the back door. He saw my mom laying on the ground bleeding and ran up the street. They noticed things weren't lining up.
By that night, police had pieced together the real events.
Around like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he was playing the Nintendo, playing video games. My mom told him that he needed to go to his school. He ended up bringing the math book in, had the knife under the math book. She grabbed it and saw the knife and screamed, and that's when he killed her. He was 14. He ended up getting charged as a juvenile, and he got sentenced to 11 years in prison. I thought my mom's life was worth more than 11 years in prison, and so basically from that point on, I decided I was going to kill him. I would get a premeditated murder charge. I would either go to prison for the rest of my life or I would receive the death penalty. So like I never even pictured really living past 27, I was a pretty angry guy. Like I didn't understand, My mom loved people so much that she was going to adopt them and take them out of a horrible situation, basically. And then he just lets my brother kill her like that. I just couldn't deal with it. I was mad at the world. I ran away from home. I spent my 15th birthday in the children's home. I started fighting. I started using drugs.
Hoping to put him on a different path, Sean was sent to military school.
So I got kicked out when I was 16, came back to South Carolina, and my dad was like, you need to do something, try and join the military or something. So I was like, well, if I join the military, I'll have extra money and I can sell drugs. Dad signed off on it. I turned 17 in June, and I went into the military in September. I was always fighting. I was still getting arrested in the military for fighting. So I was drinking a lot, smoking crack quite a bit right before I went to Afghanistan.
While deployed to Afghanistan, Sean continued his self-destructive behavior. But one night, he went too far.
I started drinking, and I ended up blacking out, and I was just laying on the ground. And so they took me to the medical tent to try and get me awake. And they finally got me awake, and I wanted to walk out, and one of them grabbed me. I hit him, and then another guy tried to grab me, and I hit them, and ended up with about 5 assault charges.
Facing 13 charges totaling 36 years in prison, Sean began to reflect and pray.
I remember just thinking about life and how it was just going to go on, and that I really didn't matter. Like, my whole life had been so self-centered on me to be this bad dude and kill my brother, and it was like so much, it was just all me. And I remember just sitting there being like, I'm gonna be like 50 years old, the entire world is gonna go on without me, and it's not gonna make any difference. I started praying, I started reading my Bible. I remember praying and just hearing God say, like, this is the last time I'm gonna get you out of something. And shortly after that, I had a meeting with my lawyer over there, And they said if I would take the other than honorable discharge, that I would leave the military. I would end up spending 30 days in jail, and I would lose my pay for 2 months, and then I would have the other honorable discharge and I would leave the military.
Sean served his time and was immediately discharged from the military.
I came back, I was definitely dealing with the PTSD stuff. I stopped sleeping at night. I didn't have a job, and I did start drinking again and smoking weed.
Feeling trapped, Sean eventually accepted his father's invitation to attend church.
Yeah, I think I was just searching for answers. The pastor was preaching on 1 John chapter 4, where he's talking about how can you say you love God whom you have not seen and hate your brother whom you have seen. I was just thinking about my brother that had killed my mom, and I know it's talking about your neighbor, but for me, I was like, how could I love my brother after he killed my mom? And so I started to wrestle with that for a couple weeks. I remember it was almost like every day or so I'd be like, God, how could I love him after he killed my mother? How could I forgive him after he killed my mother? Just one day I was asking that question. It was almost, it wasn't audible, but it was the answer that I got back was, how could I love you when you killed my son? And I just understood the weight of my sin, and that Jesus had died for me, and I understood what love was. From that point on, I have to forgive him. Who am I not to forgive somebody if this is what I've been forgiven of? If I've been forgiven of the death of Jesus. So I knew I had to forgive him. That was a big point. That was a big changing point in my life. Stopped doing it, stopped smoking weed altogether. I wasn't getting drunk. I wasn't out looking for fights or anything like that. That was all gone. I got married at 18 right before I deployed. It was so changing that my wife was like, what is happening to you? She just didn't understand it. We started going to church regularly, and I was growing a lot. I was starting to do evangelism stuff, outreach stuff, and trying to get my life back together, really.
Sean was still searching for a challenge and larger purpose when a manager at work suggested an idea.
He said that he was going to go run a marathon, and I was like, well, that sounds pretty cool. And I found half marathon, the Spartan Beast. And they were like, this is the hardest event ever. It's gonna kill you. You're not gonna finish, blah, blah, blah. So I started doing the obstacle races and loved the challenge. And I started getting better. So Ninja Warrior, my family told me that I needed to do that. They told me it was just a bunch of obstacles, and I was good at obstacles. Put a video together, sent it in, and they were like, we want you to come on the show. It's definitely cool to see what God did with all that. I was meeting police chiefs, I was meeting mayors, they were giving me certificates, for being an outstanding citizen and being a role model. Here I am, this gang mayor, crack addict, and I'm sitting in a senator's house having dinner with them, only God can do that stuff.
A few years later, God restored Sean's military standing.
I ended up getting my military discharge upgraded, and they upgraded to honorable. So I didn't even know, but I got all my benefits back. I have a successful marriage. I've been married 11 years. I have kids that are happy. I'm still very busy, full-time school, working and training, but I have more opportunities now. It really is. It's a God thing. I never could have imagined those are the things that I would be doing after the life that I did live. The people that are out there like I was, well, what are you waiting on? Stop running from God, give him a chance, and your life can be completely changed.
It's so easy to love God. It's so easy to think we've got it all straight when everything's going well, isn't it? When it all lines up and when every day goes the way we'd like it to and provides the things that meet our needs, whether it's emotional, psychological, physical. And then those things happen in life that just kind of strike at the very heart of us. In Sean's case, pretty dramatic. An adopted brother kills his mother. I think most of us would understand the anger that he felt, the bitterness that he had. The problem with anger is it becomes rage, and rage becomes uncontrolled violence, whether it's against ourselves or others. Counter to this is what Jesus said he came for. He said, I came to set the captive free. Sometimes we get stuck in that place where we are bound, we are captive to our anger, our bitterness, our resentment, our unforgiveness, and we feel like it's justified because of the significance of what was done to us or to someone that we love. without even realizing the chains that it places on us. And yet, the Bible says that we have the choice. It's always a choice, isn't it? I mean, that's the freedom God's given us as thinking creations of His. We can choose to be free of it. It's so contrary to what we feel. And yet He's asking us to make a choice that brings life. And sometimes with forgiveness, you know, we feel like we're exonerating the person who did this horrible thing. We feel like we're somehow saying it wasn't such a big deal. The truth of the matter is we're unlocking the cage that we're stuck in. It doesn't really have anything to do with the other person, but it begins with us, and it always begins with us. Today, there may be some of you out there who are watching Sean's story and you're saying, I'm stuck too, and I just want to be free. Do what Sean did. Get before the Lord and understand the price that was paid for you. We all sin. I acknowledge that murder is a very big deal. But we are the ones who caused the death of Christ, that our sins might be covered. And then He turns, and in His love and His mercy and His grace, He says, forgive. Forgive so that I can bring life into you. Look at Sean today. Look at what God's done. But it always begins with a choice. Surrender your life to Jesus Christ. It's what you were created to do. When you do, how do you grow in Him? What do you do? We've got a great little packet for you called A New Day. If you'd just like to browse through this, or if you've already prayed a prayer of commitment and you'd like to know what does it mean to follow Jesus, this is our free gift to you. The number's toll-free too. It's 1-800-700-7000. Andrew?
Thank you, Terry. Well, coming up, he's the Senior Vice President of the NBA's Orlando Magic and one of the world's top motivational speakers. He's Pat Williams, and he'll share his core virtues that build leaders and produce success. Don't miss it. That's right after this. Well, the world is certainly in need of good role models, and the Orlando Magic Senior VP Pat Williams believes there are 12 core values that can help anyone become a successful, influential leader with character. Take a look.
President of the NBA's Orlando Magic and one of America's top motivational speakers, believes that leaders with good character are made, not born. While speaking at West Point, he came across 12 benches, each highlighting a core virtue. In his book, Character Carved in Stone, Pat Williams shows us how these virtues can lead to success, not only on the battlefield, but in any area of life.
All right, our friend Pat Williams is here. Welcome back, sir.
Andy, nice to see you. Andrew,
Good
how
to
are
have you? I'm good. I remember having lunch together a couple years ago when you were here for another book, one of your 110 books, and you were so excited about this project. You were just glowing in enthusiasm with it. What excites you so much about this West Point scenario here?
Well, Andrew, first of all, when you're on the West Point campus, you're immediately just covered with history. When you think that Eisenhower and MacArthur and Grant and Omar Bradley and Matthew Ridgway and Norman Schwarzkopf, I mean, they all walked those grounds. They were all there. I mean, you're just covered with that history. I think that's the first thing that hits you.
And did you know these 12 benches existed?
No, I did not. I was invited to come up and speak to the sports teams at Army, and I had a great time doing that. And then after that, they gave me a tour of the campus, and we ended up in this little park called Trophy Point. And I looked around, beautiful little spot. And then I noticed a bench. Well, that's not unusual. Except I kept counting, and there were 12 of these benches. That was unusual. And then I thought, I'm going to take a closer look. I'm glad I did. Because what I found was a word carved into the stone on either end of the bench. And I kept checking, and yes, all 12 benches had a word carved into them. So there were 12 different words on the 12 benches. And I immediately thought, this is fascinating, but what a well-kept secret. I'd never heard of that, and I'm not sure many people had.
What were some of the themes that really struck you?
Well, you first of all, you saw compassion, and then you saw courage, and you saw words like dedication, and words like integrity and loyalty, responsibility, perseverance, service, trust, those kind of words. And there's a backstory. The West Point class of 1934, when they had their 50th reunion in 1984, they decided to have a class gift to the school 50 years later, and they gave these 12 benches. And somewhere in that process, they decided to have these 12 words engraved in those benches because they thought those were words that West Point students, future military leaders, should live their life by and lead by. And so that's the story that we came up with, and then decided, boy, this has some meat to it. So,
and in your book, you find graduates who line up with some of those themes. And right now we're in March Madness, of course. Duke is always, it seems to be there. Coach K, tell us how he fits into all this.
Well, Mike Krzyzewski was a youngster growing up on the south side of Chicago. And Bobby Knight, who was then the head coach at West Point, came to visit him and recruit him, convince his parents that this was the best spot for their son. So Bobby went there. Bobby went back to college, and Mike followed him and became a basketball player there and a student and a graduate. A few years later, down the road, he became the head coach at West Point. So Mike Krzyzewski has West Point just coursing through his blood system. He loves the school. And we thought he would be the perfect guy to do the foreword for the book, and he agreed immediately to do that. So when you watch Mike, you think it's Duke, 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 but really, deep within him, it's Army, 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 West Point. That's the makeup of Mike Krzyzewski.
And the first theme you mentioned was courage. Or excuse me, that's one I want to get to in a moment. The first theme you mentioned was compassion.
Yes.
And you picked an interesting person for that, Ulysses S. Grant.
Well, you wouldn't think of General Grant in that light because he was leading, in a very vicious war, and he was leading the Union troops, to try and just finally end this thing, and did it with relentless power. But Grant was a compassionate man. He cared deeply about his troops. He cared about his family. He had a wonderful marriage. And he cared about the horses. So much of the Civil War was on horseback. And one day he's riding along a path, and he sees this soldier of his on the side of the road just whipping and beating and pounding on his horse. And Grant erupted with anger, came over to this young soldier and threatened him to within an inch of his life if he ever saw him do that again. So we found that was kind of an unusual look at Grant, but I think he was truly a compassionate man. Maybe another way of phrasing it, Andrew, are simply are people skills. Mm-hmm. Great leaders have people skills. They care about people, and they have a heart for people.
He treated people with dignity, even his enemies.
Oh, I think so. And we saw that, of course, when General Lee did surrender, and the way that Grant treated him and insisted that all his soldiers treat the Southern soldiers with dignity. There's a lot to General Lee.
Now,
and General Grant, excuse me.
As we conclude here, I mentioned courage a moment ago, and so many people struggle with fear, just on a daily basis, irrational fear often. And one thing in your book that stood out to me was you said, to conquer your fear, do what scares you.
Yeah.
And courage is so important for us, and you brought that out of a World War II story.
Well, I did, and we talked about this man, Alexander Sandy Ramsey Nininger Jr. That's a neat story, born in Gainesville, Georgia. People will enjoy reading that.
Courageous against the enemy, often.
Yes, but there's physical courage, there's moral courage, and there's emotional courage, and there's intellectual courage, and there's spiritual courage.
Really break it down.
So we really dig deeply into this whole topic of courage. But John Wayne probably said it best. Courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway. Yeah. And that probably summarizes it quite well, I think. But courage, we need it every day to do hard things, to do tough things. And once we show and prove that we can do them, well, that's where confidence comes from, Andrew. And when you're confident, you're going to be successful. Yeah.
Well, we look forward next year. I'm sure you'll have your 111th book, probably. So it's always great to have you here, Pat.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm so glad to see you again.
Thanks for being with us. If you want to learn more, Pat's book, Character Carved in Stone, is available wherever books are sold. And we're going to go over to Terry.
Well, still to come, this woman went to 20 different doctors and was on 22 different medications, and still nothing helped until she tried functional medicine.
Functional medicine is a new way of thinking about disease that gets to the root cause. It doesn't focus so much on symptoms as the question of why you have those symptoms.
See what functional medicine entails and whether it's right for you when we come back. Functional medicine is a new approach to treating disease. It takes away the emphasis on your symptoms and focuses on the root cause of what's bothering you. CBN News medical reporter Lori Johnson introduces us to a woman who suffered for years until she found a doctor who treated her with this new method.
These days, Cindy Tedrow enjoys life, like playing with her dogs. That wasn't the case when she faced horrific health problems.
I would pray, Lord, if you want me, take me. Just take me.
For most of her adult life, she suffered from infections, fatigue, and pain.
My legs felt like they were cement, and it took that much effort to pick them up and move.
She also struggled with hormone issues and obesity.
I could not lose weight. I could not lose weight. No matter what I tried, I could not lose weight.
Her seizures made life unpredictable.
I would make a commitment and then I would have to cancel. And I know people didn't understand that. And it was so hard.
Seizures eventually forced her to stop driving and teaching.
And I loved my job. I loved my job. I just couldn't do it anymore. The hardest thing is I couldn't go to church a lot of times. And that really, really was hard.
On Cindy and her husband.
I could see the fear on his face. And I could hear the fear in my mom's voice, too.
In searching for answers, she visited 20 doctors and took numerous medications. Nothing helped.
They would send me from one specialist to another specialist, and I would have medication. They would give me medication for that particular symptom. And so at one time I was in 22 prescriptions. And getting worse. I was just getting worse.
With nothing to lose, she decided to try a different approach. She went to the Cleveland Clinic's Functional Medicine Center, led by Dr. Mark Hyman.
Functional medicine is a new way of thinking about disease that gets to the root cause. It doesn't focus so much on symptoms as the question of why you have those symptoms.
Cindy got better and fast.
In a very short time, she only lost an enormous amount of weight, but was able to end her seizures, to recover her energy, to end her brain fog, and to be engaged in her life again.
An estimated 80% of all health problems are caused by an unhealthy diet, too much sugar and processed foods, and not enough vegetables and healthy fats.
Once Cindy started eating the prescribed anti-inflammatory diet, she lost 80 pounds.
The weight just melted away. It just melted away. It's not hard. It is not hard. I basically just stick to real meat, real vegetables. I have to stay away from the carbs.
Functional medicine doctors often recommend supplementing a healthy diet with things like vitamin D, fish oil, and a probiotic.
The gut microbiome has been linked to depression and cancer and heart disease and diabetes and obesity and autoimmune diseases and allergies and asthma. So that doesn't make sense given our current model of describing disease. When you go to the cardiologist, they don't ask you about your gut microbiome, right? They want to know if they should put you on a statin or a beta blocker or an aspirin and not think about why is there inflammation? Why is there high blood pressure? Why is your cholesterol abnormal? And fix that.
Functional medicine doctors advise their patients to take steps to feel more peaceful because stress is at the root of so many health issues.
Thoughts, stress, exercise, sleep, and also community and connection, because many of us are isolated and many of us are lonely, and that promotes disease. And in a faith-based world, it's really about connection, community, belonging, meaning, purpose. Those are also ingredients for health.
They told us about meditation, and I didn't do meditation but I was already praying, and that has made a tremendous, tremendous difference.
The medical world pays attention to results like Cindy's,
which is something we see routinely in functional medicine. It's something that often traditional physicians are surprised at because these are patients that they've tried for decades to try to help and mitigate symptoms. So we don't go for symptoms, we go for causes.
Compared to the conventional approach of simply relying on big pharma, functional medicine often focuses on significant lifestyle changes. While that's more responsibility and discipline, people like Cindy Tedrow, who've tried both, say the extra effort pays off in the long run. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Well, if you'd like some more health news from Lori, make sure you check out her show, Healthy Living. You can find it at 9:30 p.m. every Tuesday on the CBN News channel. Head to cbnnews.com for more information. It's kind of like the big picture, but at the same time, the little picture.
Yeah, I thought something interesting in there that the doctor said, it was a little bit buried, was the fact that we need community. We need community connection. And then, of course, so much of our community connection now is through social media, the digital experience, et cetera, and that God designed us for fellowship with each other.
Absolutely. You got to watch that technology stuff, though. That'll raise your blood pressure.
Right, and of course the stress is such a huge factor in all this, and that piece reminds us really the basics.
Absolutely.
Exercise, eat well, sleep.
It's not that hard.
Sounds easy, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to give up the carbs, though.
Yeah, or the coffee.
The carbs
I
are I love those carbs. All right. We leave you with a scripture from Exodus chapter 18. Furthermore, you shall select out of all the people able men who fear God, men of truth, those who hate dishonest gain, and you shall place these over them as leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of 50s, and of 10s. We thank you for joining us today. We'll see you tomorrow.